One Piece chapter 1113 has had my head spinning since the moment I read it. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it, and I've spent an unreasonable amount of time rereading scenes and digging through the series, trying to find as much evidence as I can that the world has known that the tides have been rising for a long time, and we are just now catching up. So in this video, I'm going to talk about all the evidence that the world is flooding that has been right there in plain sight for a very long time. And in the next video on Monday, we're going to talk about some Chinese folklore, a story that I think might tie into all of this really nicely, actually, and might give us some insight into where Oda's going. So I know people have been talking loads about certain aspects of the story that have been recontextualized for them now that we know for sure that the world as we know it will sink into the sea. Things like the fact that Crocus is building a submarine-esque thing inside of Laboon that he can live in, that is done for practical purposes for Laboon, but also potentially because he is aware, because he learned with Roger what was going on. Rayleigh is a ship coder. Shanks doesn't have any devil fruit users in his crew, but in this video I'm focused on looking at the geography, the evidence that is all over this world that it has been, that the water levels have been rising for a long time and the world has been adapting. Starting off in the East Blue with Tequila Wolf. This bridge has been under construction for the past 700 years by demand of the world nobles. The purpose of this was to connect the islands together, and it hasn't yet been revealed why, but it seems to have begun shortly after the water levels started rising, assuming that this started at the Void Century when islands started being destroyed. It's as if they realized that their actions were causing this geographical effect and they needed to artificially create a substitute for the islands being covered by water. Even in the desert in Alabasta, Vivi tells us that the Sandora River has been overtaken by the sea. Long Ring Long Land is an obvious example as it has clearly adapted in agriculture, housing, and lifestyle, and once a year when the sea level lowers, exposing the long ring of land that connects the inlets to each other, this causes the Aqua Lengua in Water 7, which is a storm that causes a huge wave that engulfs the lower part of the city, leading to flooding and property damage. And the city has adapted to this environment. There are waterways and canals that are used for transportation, and king bulls attached to boats which move around the city. They've adapted to the fact that their city is being covered by water for years. Frankie explains the Agua Lengua to us initially as a flooding, which he then specifies that it's more accurately a sinking. After each Agua Lengua, the foundation of Water 7 sinks a little. But maybe Oda worded it that way as a hint that it's actually a bit of both. But that's just an isolated situation, right? This is one grouping of islands that this weird weather phenomena affects, and there's a bit of a chain reaction, but this is an isolated thing. Except that there's weird weather phenomena all over the One Piece world, and it's all things that can be discussed through the lens that the tides are rising, that the water levels are rising. From all the way back in chapter 2, Luffy sails calm seas, and then a sudden giant whirlpool nearly kills him. But whirlpools happen in real life all the time, right? Yes, in real life, water levels rising can cause all kinds of weather phenomena. Like storm surges, changing ocean currents can cause extreme winter weather or other sudden weather changes that would cause hurricanes, typhoons, and the like. Or smaller changes like just a strong fog. Honestly, we could attribute most of the strangeness of the weather in this world to the rising ocean levels, even down to extreme island climates like Punk Hazard. But we'll get back to the evidence in specific islands, like that there's a big freaking hole in the ocean under Enies Lobby. It's as if Lulicia has happened before. And then they built the Judicial Island on top of it as a big FU. The shores of Jaya are a different height in the Nolan flashback, confirming that the water levels have changed over time here as well. In Skypia, when Robin found Shandora, it was buried underneath another city. There is some implication that before the knockup stream moved the whole island mass to the sky, there had already been some great tragedy that ruined that layer of earth and the new city needed to be built on top of it. And we know that this city too disappeared around the same time as the Void Century. Also, look at Enel's attack. look at how much it looks like Lulicia. But we'll talk more about that on Monday. Impel Down is built on the sea floor. It's always seemed odd to me that the most notorious prisoners who need the highest security are in the largest part of the prison. It seemed to me like you would put the lowest profile prisoners in the largest section of the prison and then build up so that you don't have just a ton of wasted space. And obviously the logical answer is, duh, the most notorious prisoners are deeper in the ocean. It makes sense, but what makes even more sense now, all of it was built on land, and it's just slowly been covered up as islands have disappeared and ocean levels have risen. Fishman Island is in a bubble, and there are air pockets as a part of the design. Why does an island built for aquatic creatures need to be in a bubble? Especially since there isn't even camaraderie between the fishmen and the humans. So why would they adapt their kingdom for someone that wants nothing to do with them? It kind of seems like Fishman Island has adapted to being underwater, like maybe it hasn't always been here. Plus, Fishman Island sits underneath the Red Line, and many theorize that the Red Line was made by man anyway, so I wonder if they built it on top of Fishman Island, kind of like the way they did with Ynys Lobby, and then made their god kingdom over what they had tried to exterminate. I have a lot of thoughts about this and I need to do a little bit more research, but we don't know that the same ancient weapon has always been used all this time to do whatever it is that they were doing. So it's not necessarily that every island has been vaporized. Maybe some of them have just been displaced. I don't know, I have to think about that a little bit more. But it was mentioned one time that fishmen's tails can split and they can have legs. In fact, that's how we were first introduced to fishmen. So they clearly are adaptable on land. I don't know. You can let me know what you think about that. This one feels a little bit more like a stretch, but also feels like it needs to be noted. There are many islands that seem to be built specifically to prevent flooding, like Dressrosa with these huge walls, Zoe, which is intentionally on top of a giant elephant, Alabasta, Drum Island, and so many others seem to be built as if they're aware of the rising water levels and have just found the highest ground possible to prevent themselves from having to build on top of themselves like other places have had to do. Editing Murphy here to also mention that the information that we have so far about Wano is that these rock sides just sprouted up. This one's a bit confusing to me because ocean waters rising causes faster erosion. So it should be doing the opposite. So this one confuses me a little bit. It doesn't seem like the Wano citizens understand why these great walls grew up around the island either. And of course it ended up being filled with rainwater, therefore causing them to build up their city again like Water 7, but the circumstances are completely different and they actually don't match with the rest of this video. But I felt like it needed to be mentioned because this is doing the opposite, and Oda seems to be very intentionally planting these seeds, so I think it should be mentioned. And y'all are better theorizers than me, so maybe you can put two and two together where I can't. And then finally, of course, Lulicia. Now, I've seen quite a few people mention that the island is potentially pushed down to the bottom of the seafloor, and that's what's causing the sea levels to rise. And at first, I totally bought into that as a sort of water displacement idea, and even maybe that's what happened to Fishman Island. But at least from what Oda has told us so far, when Oda showed us the gaping hole left when Lulicia was destroyed, it said ensuing earthquakes caused the global sea level to rise by approximately 1 meter. So he attributed the sea level rising to earthquakes, not to an island being pushed down. And earthquakes do cause sea levels to rise. That's a real thing. So that's not to say that both can't be true. I mean, it's Oda, he can do what he wants, but I'm just saying that as of right now, I'm not putting all my eggs in the basket of the island just being shoved down to the bottom of the ocean. Everyone in the manga seems to think that the island was vaporized. Anyway, I do think that Vegapunk's message isn't done. I do think that he has more to say in this video recording that we've finally gotten to the message on, and that this is just the introduction, and he'll probably end up telling us more about what is causing the sea levels to rise officially. But until then, my brain's just been spinning. I've spent so much time rereading chapters, looking up certain scenes, trying to understand the specifics, and trying to pull all this together. So if you enjoyed this video, please do consider sharing it. I don't ask for that very very often, but it genuinely does help my channel. But what did I miss? I know that there has to be more. I dug through a lot, but this is also a huge series and y'all have been reading it a lot longer than I have, so what else do you see that I didn't see that shows evidence that this world has been aware of this for a long time and maybe just didn't realize what was causing it or didn't realize that it was a worldwide phenomena, and here we are finally catching up. I would love to hear additional evidence and continue geeking out, and in the meantime I will continue researching this piece of Chinese folklore that I think could potentially be really fun to compare to the series and where it's possibly going. I'll see you again soon. Bye.